My wife cheated on me with her boss, then turned our $350, $0 inheritance into a nightmare of lies, secrets, and a bitter legal battle over the house we never even got to live in. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here telling a story about how my wife cheated on me with her boss, then turned our entire inheritance into a nightmare of lies, secrets, and legal battles. Honestly, it all started with what I thought were little signs, things I brushed off at first because I didn't want to believe the worst. But then, the pieces started falling into place, and I realized I was living in a world I no longer recognized. And I had been together for over 10 years. We met in college, got married right after graduation, and for the most part, I thought we had a good life. We didn't have kids, but we had a nice house, decent jobs, and a shared dream of building a future. That future, at least in my mind, was secure. We had recently come into a significant inheritance, about $350, $0 from my grandparents' estate. We agreed to use it for a down payment. On a house, maybe start a small business, something that would give us stability and a fresh start. We were finally on the cusp of that, or so I thought. But then things started to shift. Who used to be the kind of woman who'd text me good morning, ask about my day, and share her thoughts became distant. She'd come home late, sometimes smelling like perfume I didn't recognize. She'd shrug it off when I asked, saying she was working late or with friends or just tired. But I noticed the little things, her phone ringing at odd hours, her deleting texts, her avoiding my gaze when I caught her looking at her phone. One night I decided to check her messages. I know that's usually a sign of distrust, but I was just desperate to understand what was going on. I found a series of texts between her and her boss, Mark. They were flirting, nothing overt at first, but enough to make me uncomfortable. Then I saw the kind of language they used, the suggestive remarks, the way they talked about meeting up after hours. It was clear they'd been more than just colleagues. I also noticed her behavior changing around the house. She'd be defensive when I asked questions, snapping at me, calling me paranoid. But the biggest shock came when I found a pair of women's underwear in her laundry that definitely wasn't hers. I confronted her about it, and she spun some bullshit story about how they must belong to her friend from work who was over last weekend. Of course, anything was going on. But I knew better. I could see the guilty look in her eyes. That's when I decided I couldn't ignore it anymore. I started digging more, checking her emails, her social media, even her bank statements. I found out she'd been meeting Mark in secret, staying out late, and even lying about her whereabouts. I felt betrayal like I'd never felt before. This woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew, was cheating on me with her boss, someone who was supposed to be her mentor, her colleague, someone she had no reason to be involved with outside of work. The worst part, she kept lying. Every time I brought it up, she'd deny everything, call me crazy, say I was imagining things, accuse me of distrust. She told me I was overreacting, that she loved me, and that Mark was just a friend. But I knew better. I could see the way she looked at him when she thought I wasn't watching. I saw the texts, the late-night calls, the secret meetings. And what hurt even more was how she turned our situation into a game, a way to manipulate me, to keep her secrets safe behind layers of lies. I was angry, hurt, confused, and honestly, I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. How could she do this? After everything we'd been through, after planning a future together, she chose to betray me with someone I thought was just her boss, her colleague. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about trust, respect, and the life we'd built. I started to realize that our inheritance, our future, was now at risk because of her reckless decisions and her blatant lies. That's when I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let her keep lying, keep cheating, keep destroying what little we had left. I started to plan my next move, but I didn't tell her that. I needed to see how deep this thing went first, how much damage had been done. I just knew I had to be careful, because once I revealed what I knew, everything was going to change. I could feel it in my bones. The betrayal was too big to ignore, and I was about to face a storm I never saw coming. I started gathering evidence, not just for myself, but to understand exactly how far had gone. I didn't want to jump to conclusions without proof. I needed to see the extent of her lies, and honestly, I needed to be prepared for whatever she threw at me. The first thing I did was install a keylogger on her phone. I know, it sounds creepy, but I was desperate. I needed to see her messages, her calls, everything. And what I found was worse than I expected. Over the next few days, I watched her slip into a routine that was almost mechanical. She'd leave the house in the mornings, claiming she was going to work, but I'd see her slipping out the back door when I was at work, or sometimes, I'd catch her sneaking out late at night. She'd meet Mark at a nearby hotel or a restaurant that I'd never even heard of. They'd stay out for hours and I'd get glimpses of their texts, flirty, suggestive, sometimes outright explicit. The kind of messages that made my stomach turn. I also started noticing her phone bills, which she'd been trying to hide. There were dozens of calls to Mark's number, many late at night, and texts that only made sense once I read between the lines. I felt sick every time I saw her lying about her whereabouts, her excuses becoming more elaborate. She'd say she was at the gym or running errands, but I knew better. I had proof that she'd been lying, and it burned me up inside. One night, I decided to follow her. I didn't want her to know I was onto her, not yet. I parked a few blocks away and watched her meet Mark at a hotel. She was wearing that same bitchy smirk she always used when she thought she was getting away with something. She was so confident, so dismissive of the damage she was causing. Seeing her like that, so comfortable with her lies, made my blood boil. I watched her go inside, her hand on his shoulder, and I felt a strange mix of rage and heartbreak. How did it come to this? The next day, I confronted her. I wanted her to see that I knew everything. I told her I had seen the messages, the hotel, the late-night calls. Her reaction was a mixture of shock and anger. She spun her usual web of lies, saying I was paranoid, that I was imagining things, that Mark was just a friend helping her with work stress. She even had the nerve to call me insecure and accuse me of not trusting her. That was the moment I realized she was good at lying, but her face betrayed her guilt. Her eyes darted, her voice cracked, and I could tell she was panicked. I asked her outright, "Are you sleeping with him?" Her face went pale for a second, then she scoffed and said, "You're crazy, you're overreacting. Mark is like a brother to me." But I saw the sweat on her forehead, the way her hands trembled. I knew she was lying, and I was furious that she thought I'd buy her bullshit. I told her I'd had enough, that I wasn't going to be played for a fool anymore. I told her I deserved honesty, and she could either come clean or face the consequences. Her excuses didn't hold water. She kept insisting that nothing was going on, that I was just jealous, that I was imagining things because I was insecure. I felt a terrible mix of sadness and anger. It was like watching her slowly tear apart the life we had built, and I was powerless to stop her. I wanted to scream, to shake her and demand the truth, but I stayed calm. I knew that if I lost my temper, I'd lose any chance of getting real answers. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying everything I'd uncovered. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and deeply hurt. I'd always trusted her, and now I saw her for what she really was, someone who was willing to throw everything away for a quick fling with her boss. But beneath all that pain, a new feeling started to grow: determination. I wasn't going to let her destroy us without a fight. I had evidence now, and I was going to use it, not just to confront her, but to figure out my next move. In the days that followed, I started planning my revenge. I wasn't interested in petty games or revenge just for the sake of it. I wanted her to see that her actions had consequences. I wanted her to understand that I wasn't going to be a doormat. I also knew that her lies about the inheritance and the house we never even got to live in were part of her manipulation. She kept insisting that I had no right to be upset because she was still the same, but I saw through her. I saw that her lies weren't just about the affair. They were about control, about keeping me in the dark, about making me doubt myself. So, I started talking to a lawyer, gathering documentation, trying to understand what our options were. The inheritance was a big part of the puzzle. We were supposed to use it to buy a house, to build a future, but now it was tangled up in her lies, her secrets, her betrayal. I knew I'd have to fight for what's mine, for what we were supposed to have. I Didn't know exactly how everything would play out, but I was already planning my next steps. Had pushed me to the edge, and I was ready to push back hard. After I gathered enough evidence to make her uncomfortable, I decided it was time to confront again, but this time with a plan. I needed her to admit everything, or at least to crack under pressure. I wanted her to understand that I wasn't going to be played anymore. I also knew that I had to be strategic. If I went in guns blazing, she'd just deny everything and try to manipulate me further. So I prepared myself mentally, kept a cool head, and set up a meeting at a neutral place, our favorite actually. I figured that if I could get her to slip up there, I'd have her cornered. When she arrived, I could see the annoyance on her face. She knew I was serious, that I wasn't going to let her dismiss what I knew. She sat down across from me, crossing her arms, giving me that icy, bitchy look she always used when she was trying to intimidate me. I took a deep breath, looked her straight in the eyes, and laid out everything I'd found. About her late-night meetings, her texts, the hotel, the underwear, the calls. I told her I had proof and I wasn't going to back down. Her reaction was classic defensive, angry, and dismissive. She scoffed and rolled her eyes, saying I was crazy, that I was reading too much into things, and that I was accusing her of something she didn't do. She even had the nerve to say that Mark was just a mentor, that I was overreacting because I was insecure. I felt a mixture of rage and disgust. How could she lie so effortlessly? How could she pretend she didn't know what she'd done? I pressed her harder. I told her I'd seen the messages, the hotels, the late nights. I told her I knew she was cheating and I wasn't going to let her keep pretending everything was okay. I asked her point blank, "Are you sleeping with Mark?" Her face darkened, but she refused to answer directly. Instead, she threw out more lies, how it was all a misunderstanding, how Mark was just helping her with work, how I was imagining things. Because I didn't trust her, that's when I lost it. I told her I wasn't stupid, that I'd had enough of her lies. She started crying then, big fake tears, the kind she's perfected over the years. She said she loved me, that she'd never do anything to hurt me, that I was her everything. But I wasn't buying it. I could see the desperation in her eyes, the way she tried to manipulate me into feeling guilty or insecure. I told her that I deserved honesty, that I wasn't going to be a fool anymore. I told her that I knew about her affair and I wanted her to face the consequences of her actions. She kept denying everything, even when I showed her the proof. She insisted that she was innocent, that I was just paranoid and jealous. She called me crazy, said I was overreacting, and accused me of not trusting her. I felt a deep surge of anger and disappointment. How could she lie so effortlessly? How could she try to gaslight me after everything we'd been through? I'd never felt so betrayed in my life. That moment, I realized I had to make a decision. I couldn't keep living in this false reality where she was lying to my face. I told her I needed time to think, that I was done with her lies. I left the feeling numb, like I'd been punched in the gut. Every part of me was aching, my trust, my pride, my future. But I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I knew I couldn't stay in this marriage, not with her lying and cheating behind my back. Over the next few days, I started doing some serious soul-searching. I reached out to a lawyer about the inheritance, the house, and how to protect what was rightfully mine. I also started thinking about how her betrayal had affected everything: my emotions, my sense of security, my future plans. I'd always believed in honesty and loyalty, and now I saw how fragile those things really were. My trust had been shattered, and I knew I couldn't fix it with her. Meanwhile, kept up her lies. She tried to manipulate me, calling me crazy and jealous, insisting that she still loved me and that it was all a mistake. But I could see through her act. She was panicked, trying to hold on to what little control she still had. I wasn't about to let her manipulate me anymore. I had enough proof, enough anger, enough heartbreak. I knew I had to take control of my life and do what was best for me. The legal battle was just beginning, and I knew it wouldn't be easy. But I was determined. I refused to let her ruin everything we had, especially the inheritance that was supposed to secure our future. I realized that sometimes love isn't enough. Trust, loyalty, and respect matter more. And right now, I was left with nothing but the truth and a resolve to fight for what's mine. The days that followed were a blur of legal consultations and sleepless nights. I was trying to piece together everything: how I'd managed to turn our inheritance into a tangled mess of lies, how she used her charm and manipulation to keep me from seeing the truth sooner. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. For years, I trusted her, believed in the life we were building, and now I saw it all unraveling in front of me. I finally decided to hire a lawyer who specialized in property and inheritance cases. The house we never even got to live in was supposed to be our new beginning, but lies had complicated everything. She'd been claiming that the inheritance was a joint asset, but I had proof that it was legally mine, funds I inherited from my grandparents, which I had kept separate until now. I knew I had to fight for it, and I was prepared to go all the way. Meanwhile's behavior grew more erratic. She started lying even more, trying to cover her tracks. She'd tell me she was at work when I knew she was out with Mark. She accused me of stalking her, calling me paranoid and insisting I was imagining things. But I had the evidence: screenshots of her messages, bank statements, hotel receipts. I kept it all close, knowing I'd need it when the time came. One afternoon, I found her phone lying on the kitchen counter. It was unlocked, and I saw a message from Mark that I hadn't seen before. It was a simple "can't wait to see you tonight" with a heart emoji. That was the last straw. I grabbed my phone, took a screenshot, and then called my lawyer. That was it. She couldn't deny it anymore. I knew I had to confront her again, but this time I had the proof. I sat her down in the living room, my heart pounding. I told her I knew everything: the affair, the lies, the manipulation. I showed her the message from Mark, and her face drained of color. She stammered, trying to come up with more excuses, but I cut her off. I told her I was done playing her game. I was filing for divorce, and I was going to fight for the house, the inheritance, and my peace of mind. Her response was a mixture of anger and tears. She called me crazy, said I was ruining everything, that she loved me but couldn't help what she'd done. She begged me to forgive her, that it was just a mistake, that she'd end it with Mark. But I knew better. I knew her lies wouldn't stop. She'd been lying for months, betraying everything we stood for, and I couldn't trust her anymore. I was done trusting her. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything: her lies, her cheating, the way she turned our inheritance into her personal playground of deception. I felt betrayed, but I also felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in months, I saw a way out. I knew I had to be strong, to stand my ground and fight for what was rightfully mine. I was tired of her lies, tired of feeling like I was walking on eggshells. The legal process started moving quickly after that. I filed the papers, and my lawyer advised me to document everything: proof of the affair, the financial records, her attempts to manipulate me. It was clear she was trying to hide her tracks, but I had enough to make a solid case. I wasn't just fighting over the house anymore. I was fighting to reclaim my life from her lies and betrayal. In the meantime, s facade cracked even more. She became more aggressive, more desperate. She accused me of ruining her life, of being unfair, of trying to control her. But I knew I was only trying to protect what was left of my sanity and my future. I couldn't let her continue to manipulate me. Not anymore. I had to do what was necessary to put an end to this nightmare. Looking back, I realize how much I'd lost: trust, stability, even my sense of security. But I also learned something vital: never ignore the signs of betrayal, and always stand up for what's yours. If I'd confronted her sooner, maybe things wouldn't have gotten so messy. But at the end of the day, I knew I had to take control. I had to fight for my rights, for the inheritance we'd worked so hard for, and for the dignity that tried to strip away with her lies. This is just the beginning of what I know will be a long fight, but I'm ready for it. The courtroom battles started a few weeks after I filed for divorce. The legal process was brutal and didn't go down without a fight. She tried every trick in the book: lying, twisting facts, even attempting to claim that I was the one cheating or abusing her. But I had the evidence, and I was prepared to see this through. The inheritance, the house, the affair, everything was on the line, and I was determined to get what was rightfully mine. During the hearings, bitchy attitude only intensified. She was sharp-tongued, trying to undermine me at every turn. She'd lie under oath, deny the affair, and blame me for everything that went wrong. Her lawyer was aggressive, but I had my own legal team and we had everything documented. I kept cool, letting the evidence do the talking. I knew if I lost my temper, I'd give her ammunition, so I stayed calm, focused, and relentless. One day, the judge called for a temporary restraining order because accused me of harassment. It was a lie. She was trying to paint me as the villain to sway the court's opinion. But I had the proof of her affair and her manipulation, and I presented it with confidence. The judge saw through her lies and her request, but the damage was done. The court was starting to see her for what she was, a manipulative, selfish woman who was trying to cling to her lies. Meanwhile, I worked with my lawyer to secure the inheritance. I had to prove that the money was mine from the start, my grandparents' estate, and that claims that it was a joint asset were false. It wasn't easy. She kept trying to spin stories about how she had contributed in some way, but I had the documentation. Bank statements, legal documents, everything pointed to the fact that this inheritance was mine, and I was going to fight to keep it. The house was another big issue. Had been claiming that she deserved a share because she supposedly helped with renovations and maintenance, but I had receipts and photos proving I paid for everything. I knew she was trying to manipulate the situation, but I was prepared. My lawyer filed motions to ensure the house was awarded to me, and I was ready to go to court if needed. Throughout all this, his behavior grew more erratic. She'd show up at my workplace, trying to guilt-trip me, crying and begging for one last chance. She'd call me names, accuse me of ruining her life, and threaten to take me to court for custody of the house or the inheritance, though I knew she had no leg to stand on. I was tired of her manipulations, tired of her crying wolf, and tired of feeling like I was fighting a losing battle. But I refused to give up. I knew I had the truth on my side. I had evidence, the legal backing, and a clear conscience. I all started to realize how much her lies had affected me. Trust was shattered, and I was angry at myself for not seeing it sooner. Still, I was proud of how far I'd come. I was no longer the naive husband who believed in fairy tales. I was a man who was fighting for his future. As the court dates progressed, desperation became more evident. She'd make wild accusations, accuse me of stalking her, of trying to ruin her reputation. But I had nothing to hide. My focus was on protecting what was mine, my inheritance, my sanity, and the truth. I knew she was grasping at straws, trying to turn the tables, but I was ready for that. I had the facts, and I was determined to see justice done. Looking back, I realize how much I've learned from this nightmare. Betrayal cuts deep, especially when it's from someone you loved and trusted. But I also learned that honesty and integrity matter more than ever. I refused to let her manipulate me, and I stayed true to myself. The fight isn't over yet, but I feel more confident than ever that I will come out of this stronger. I still have a long road ahead, but I also have clarity, and that's worth more than any inheritance or house. The final court hearing was a whirlwind. After months of fighting, lying, and manipulation, the judge finally made a ruling. It was a long day, but I knew I'd done everything I could to present my case. Sat there, her face a mixture of anger and desperation, trying to hold herself together. I felt a strange sense of relief mixed with exhaustion. The judge ruled in my favor on the inheritance and the house, confirming that those assets belonged solely to me and that had no claim to them. Her attempts to manipulate the situation with lies about her contributions were dismissed outright. It was over. Walking out of the courtroom, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't just about the money or the house. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my trust in myself, and my future. Constant lies, her betrayal had cost us everything: our marriage, our stability, and even the chance to build a new life together. But I knew I had made the right choice by standing firm. I had fought for what was mine, and I had won. In the weeks that followed, I started to rebuild. I moved out of the house, found a new place to live, and slowly began to piece my life back together. The betrayal still stings, but I refuse to let it define me. I've learned to trust my instincts again, to be cautious, and to value honesty above all else. I know now that betrayal can come from the people you love most, but it also teaches you resilience. Tried to reach out a few times, but I kept my distance. I wanted nothing more to do with her lies and manipulation. I've come to realize that some betrayals run so deep that reconciliation isn't possible. I hold no resentment, only a sense of closure. The inheritance is mine, the house is mine, and I am finally free from her web of lies. Looking back, I wish I'd seen the signs sooner, but I also know that I did what I could with what I had. If anyone out there finds themselves in a similar situation, I'd say this: trust your gut, document everything, and don't be afraid to fight for what's rightfully yours. People can surprise you, sometimes with betrayal, but also with the strength you find within yourself when you stand your ground. Now I'm focusing on my future. I've started therapy, rebuilding my confidence and learning how to trust again. It's a slow process, but I'm determined. The pain of betrayal doesn't disappear overnight, but I've learned that you can recover, grow, and move forward. I don't regret standing up for myself, and I don't regret fighting for what I deserve. Life goes on, and I'm finally ready to face it on my own terms.